Joining me now from Salford is Labour's health spokesman Andy Burnham. Andy Burnham, what exactly are you proposing?
Well, the first thing is, can I just correct something in your piece there, Robert? And to say that I'm inconsistent, that I did something in government and saying something different in opposition. In government, I changed policy towards the NHS preferred provider principle because I was saying that the public NHS is important, a service that puts people before profits, and my views haven't changed. What we've seen, though, under this government is a very big change, towards forced tendering of services. And it's now taking the NHS into new territory. We're seeing large contracts being offered for sensitive services such as cancer care and older people's care, suggesting that this government sees no limits at all on the use of the private sector. And my big point is, who gave this Prime Minister permission to put the NHS up for sale in this way? Because if you remember, Robert, before the last election, he said there would be no reorganisation of the NHS and then brought forward the biggest ever. So at the end of the day, it's really not what I think. The British public have never given their consent for their most valued institution to be broken up and sold off in this way.
But hang on a second. Who gave Labour permission before the election in which you were Health Secretary? Because in that period, actually privatisation, on your definition, went up by 60% and it's gone up only 20% under this government. So where was the permission that you got?
I'm not sure you've got your
No,
figures
these
right.
are official
Let me
statistics.
explain the different role. Labour used the private sector in a supporting capacity to provide additional capacity to bring down NHS waiting lists. Our mandate was to bring down NHS waiting lists, and we did, to the lowest ever level. What I am saying to you is that this government has changed that. It has forced tendering on the NHS, and we are now seeing huge contracts being put out. The FT will report tomorrow that there is currently £6 billion worth of the NHS out to open tender, potentially to be signed before the next election. And I just don't think that's acceptable when the public have never given their express consent for the NHS to be broken up and sold off in this way.
But you explicitly said in 2009, I'm going to quote you, we can finally move beyond polarising debates of private or public sector provision. Were you just wrong that actually that distinction is an artificial one?
No, because I said to you at the beginning, I introduced the NHS preferred provider policy, but I saw a role for other providers, the voluntary or the private sector, supporting the NHS, supporting the public NHS.
So you were wrong at the time.
If you let me make the
you've changed your mind. That is what you're saying.
No, because I've just explained to you what I said. This government sees a replacement role. So it sees the core public NHS being replaced by private providers. Now, that is to take the NHS into new territory. And I put it to you again, the British public have never given their consent for that policy. And that is the crucial issue here. If David Cameron wants to pursue that policy, he must explicitly go to the next election and say, this is the kind of health service we want. Now, I've put out a vision today for a very different health service under Labour, a public integrated health service based on that principle of the NHS as preferred provider. Because at the end of the day, that matters. I'm passionate about the public NHS and what it represents because it's a service based on people, not profits.
But I'm not clear why you think it matters. Actually, when people are polled, what they say the NHS is about is free at the point of use. People, frankly, seem to be very neutral about who provides that service, so long as the quality is there. We have, for example, hang on. We have, as you know, some of the worst mortality rates for cancer of any rich country. Why not try the private sector to see if we can improve those mortality rates?
Well, let me just answer your main point there, because this is the crux of it, isn't it? I think people value the service that we have that, as I say, is based on people, not profits. And that means when people walk through the door of the NHS, it's you that matters. It's not your bank balance or the views of shareholders that the important thing. That is the essence of the service we have. And I think that is what Danny Boyle was celebrating at the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games. Now, you mentioned cancer care. I've shown today how cancer care has gone backwards under this government. We're seeing the national cancer target missed for the first time. So, the government's reforms aren't making things better. They're making things worse. The NHS has gone downhill under David Cameron. So, I think this is the crux of the debate we have to have at the election. This is the choice we have to have. Do we want an NHS that continues on a people not profits basis, or do we want a very different service? And I'm very clear that I think the public want to see the NHS continue. If we carry on allowing the inexorable advance of the market into the NHS, in the end, Robert, it will devour everything that's precious about it.
I mean, and just so that I can grasp what it is you're saying here, I just want to return to your period as Health Secretary. There was a hospital that failed under Labour, Hinchingbrook in Cambridgeshire. It was moved down the runway to privatisation when you were Health Secretary. It's now perceived as a privately run hospital for the NHS to be providing very high quality treatment. Are you saying that you would reverse that private sector management of Hinchingbrook? Was it a mistake that you made to move it in that direction?
Well, I don't think you could just reverse contracts that have been signed. But let's be clear on that example. I was seeking a NHS provider for that hospital under my NHS preferred provider principle, and it was this government that signed the contract.
Well, no, the NHS was unable to bid when you.
Not me. But let me make the broader point, Robert. You know, in the end, you have to decide what kind of health service you want. And if you look around the world, market-based healthcare systems cost more, not less, than systems like the NHS, but also they do something different to the quality of care. What they lead to is greater fragmentation of care when the future, the 21st century, demands integration of care. So I am quite clear that the market is not the answer to 21st century care. And I'm setting out my stall today. Now, you may disagree with it, but I'm pretty clear that that is the principle on which we should build our health service going forward. And those are the foundations on which I am developing Labour's vision for the NHS in the 21st century.
Andy Burnham, many thanks.
Thank you.